This happened a few weeks ago. I'm Jake, a 35-year-old freelance travel writer. I thought spending a week in the Blue Ridge Mountains would inspire my next piece on local culture. I've traveled a lot, but what I found there felt different. I still can't shake the feeling that something was very off. When I first arrived, my rental cabin felt cozy. It sat on a quiet hillside surrounded by tall trees. The first evening, I decided to go into town for dinner. I walked into a little diner, eager for food and company. The smell of frying food filled the air. I took a seat at the counter. As I looked around, I noticed everyone whispering and stealing glances at me. I felt a chill. The waitress, with tired eyes, served me without a smile. I asked her about local specialties, but she nodded and looked away. I thought maybe small towns had their quirks. The next day, I set out to explore. I hiked along winding trails, enjoying the view. But a nagging feeling stuck with me. In the afternoon, I stopped by a small market. The cashier stared at me without speaking. When I made eye contact, he mumbled some prices and looked down. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe he was just shy. As dusk fell, the trees whispered in the breeze. I noticed strange symbols carved into the bark of a nearby tree. It felt wrong, but I convinced myself it was just local folklore. The symbols made me uneasy, but I pushed it aside. By my third night, I felt the sense of dread grow. An old man appeared at my door, leaning heavily on a walking stick. His eyes seemed to bore into my soul. "You're not safe here," he said in a cracked voice. I wanted to laugh, but I felt frozen instead. "What do you mean?" I asked. He just shook his head and walked away. The next morning I found symbols etched into the ground near my cabin. It felt wrong. I could hear muffled conversations from the neighboring cabin mixed with nervous laughter. I tried to ignore it, thinking the locals were just eccentric. But something still didn't sit right with me. As my trip neared its end, I overheard strange stories about disappearances. Why hadn't anyone spoken to me directly? What was going on? A storm of thoughts swirled in my head as I packed my bags. I still felt unsettled. As I stepped outside for the last time, I turned to grab my final bag. I saw a figure at the edge of the trees. They were staring right at me. My heart raced. I couldn't see their face, but I felt like I was being watched closely. Then I heard the whisper, "You shouldn't have come here." I froze. I turned back to the cabin, but when I looked again, the figure was gone. The feeling of being watched lingered in the air. I hurried away from that cabin, vowing never to return. As I drove away from the cabin, the landscapes blurred together, a cacophony of greens and browns. I thought about the week I'd spent there, and how it had turned into a nightmare. My grip tightened on the steering wheel, the uneasiness settling in like a stone in my stomach. I took the winding road out of the mountains, but my mind kept drifting back to the figure at the tree line, the warning that echoed in my ears. You shouldn't have come here. What had I stumbled into? I needed to distract myself, so I decided to stop at a roadside cafe. It seemed like a good idea, some normalcy after the creepiness. I pulled into the parking lot with a sigh, hoping to shake off the tension. It was a small place, rusted signs hanging the walls, but it felt warm and inviting. As I stepped inside, a bell jingled, and the smell of fresh coffee enveloped me. Instead of relief, my heart sank again when I saw a familiar face, the waitress from the diner. She was at the counter, her eyes darting toward me with that same expression of wariness. I approached slowly, feeling the weight of her gaze. "Back again?" she asked, her voice strained. I nodded, hesitating before asking, "Can I get something to eat?" "Sure," she said, quickly jotting down my order, but then she paused, leaning closer. "You should leave, right away." Confusion washed over me. "What do you mean?" "They're watching you. I can see it." Her voice dropped to a whisper as she glanced around. "Just be careful." I felt a chill run through me. The locals really were wrapped up in some unseen tension that choked every conversation. I forced a smile, but inside I was spiraling. After finishing my meal, I decided I had to know more about the disappearances I overheard. I paid my bill and approached the waitress again. "Do you know anything about the missing people?" Her eyes widened and panic sharpened her features. "You shouldn't ask. Just go. But please take my advice. I stepped back, sensing I had crossed a line. I exited the cafe feeling even more unsettled. I couldn't shake her frightened tone. This small town had secrets buried deep, and I was digging too close to them. Back in my car, I tried to rationalize everything, the whispers, the glances, the eerie feeling of eyes following me. I wasn't one to be easily spooked, but the dread was becoming palpable. That's when I noticed something in my rearview mirror. A shadowy figure hovered just behind my car. I blinked, convinced it would vanish, but it didn't. It was the old man from before. He was standing on the side of the road, the stick in his hand, eyes locked on me. I couldn't breathe. Was he waiting for me to drive away? I floored the gas, escaping the cafe, heart racing. But even as the miles rolled by, I felt the old man's stare burn into my back. I was out of the mountains, but I felt no safer. I needed to know more about what I had stumbled into, but the urgency in the old man's eyes haunted me. I couldn't help but wonder if I had awakened something that should have remained undisturbed. And still, that shadow loomed over me. I knew I'd have to confront it sooner rather than later. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of rain tapping against the window. It felt fitting. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being drawn deeper into something dark and dangerous. I decided to stay in town a little longer, hoping to uncover the truth behind the warnings and the strange behavior of the locals. I started with the local library. If there were records of missing people or strange happenings in the area, they had to be somewhere. The building was small and dusty, with shelves crammed full of old books. It had an almost forgotten quality that made me uneasy. I approached the desk, where an elderly woman was sorting through a stack of papers. "Can I help you?" she asked, looking up with tired eyes. "I'm looking for information on the recent disappearances," I said, trying to sound casual. Her expression hardened. "You should leave that alone." "Why?" I pressed. "Is there something going on that I should know about?" She sighed, glancing nervously around the room. "There's a reason people go missing in these parts. Some stories are better left untold." The weight of her words hung in the air. I felt as if I was treading on dangerous ground, but I wasn't about to turn back now. "Do you have any records? Anything at all?" The woman stared at me, weighing her options. Finally, she slid a folder across the counter. "Just know that curiosity can lead to trouble." I opened the folder and scanned the pages. The names and dates sent chills down my spine. I recognized some of the people. The young man seen wandering near my cabin, a couple who had been frequent visitors to the area. They all had something in common. They had vanished without a trace. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from outside. I rushed to the window, peering out to see a group of people gathered in the street. Their voices were raised, a mix of anger and fear. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but there was an urgency in their tone that sent a shiver down my spine. Before I knew it, I was standing outside, moving closer to the commotion. I didn't want to be part of it, but the fear tugged at me. I needed to know what was happening. As I approached, I recognized a few of the faces from the cafe. They were frightened, their eyes darting around as if they were expecting something or someone. Then I saw him. The old man from the road stood in the middle of the group, and this time he wasn't just watching. He was shouting, pointing to the trees like they were hiding a terrible secret. "They are coming! They're coming for you!" The crowd surged back, panic spreading like wildfire. I could feel it creeping into me, the primal urge to escape burning in my legs. But before I could move, the old man turned his gaze to me, and for a moment, Our eyes locked. I felt an icy grip close around my heart. He opened his mouth, and I could almost hear him warning me again. "You shouldn't have come here." Then his voice was lost in the shouts of the crowd. That's when I saw it, a shadow darting between the trees behind him, something large and quick. My breath caught in my throat. Whatever was lurking in the woods wasn't just a figment of my imagination. It was real, and it wasn't far away. I turned to run, desperate to get away, but I knew then that I was already too far in. A dark thrill twisted in my stomach. What had I stumbled into? I needed answers fast, or I might end up just like the rest of them. The ground felt unstable underfoot as I stepped back from the crowd. Panic thrummed through me, filling the spaces between my thoughts. I had to move, but the fear froze my feet in place. Voices around me were a cacophony of worry, each one more frantic than the last. With my heart racing, I turned away from the looming trees and the old man's fearful gaze. I stumbled toward the cafe, the only familiar spot in this sea of uncertainty. As I neared, I spotted the barista from earlier, her wide eyes gleaming with something like recognition, or maybe pity. "You saw it, didn't you?" she blurted out, the question hardly more than a breath. "What was that?" I asked, the urge to flee still clawing at me. "They say it's part of the forest. The old stories say it hunts. It doesn't play fair." She shook her head, as if trying to shake off a bad memory. "They thought sending you back would help, but now it knows you're here." "Sending me back?" I swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" "Some think the disappearances are connected. They watch newcomers. If the stories are true, it chooses who it wants." Her words twisted in my gut like a knife. I felt the temperature drop. A chill settled into my bones. "But why me?" "Because you asked questions." She glanced over her shoulder, her voice lowered to barely a whisper. "You shouldn't have come here." I took a step back. A knot formed in my stomach as the reality of my situation crashed over me. I'd come seeking answers, but what I found was a town brimming with secrets and fear. Turning my gaze to the door, I felt drawn to the outside again, but I hesitated, thoughts of the shadow lingering in my mind. Suddenly the cafe door swung open, and a man burst through, panic etched across his rugged face. "They're gathering, they know you're here." My heart raced anew. "Who? What do they want?" He caught his breath, his eyes darting back toward the street. "They don't want newcomers poking around. We have to warn you. There are those who'll do anything to protect their secrets." As he spoke, I felt a hollow pit grow in my chest. Danger was closing in from all sides. Protect their secrets from what? He hesitated, caught in a web of his own fears. "From the truth," he muttered, glancing back over his shoulder. Just then, a sound pierced the air, a low growl that reverberated through the ground like a thunderclap. The locals began to scatter, and the man's eyes widened. "It's too late. You need to go." I didn't have a plan. I had no idea where to run. But with that growl pouring out of the trees, my feet moved on instinct. I bolted past the barista and out into the street. Panic gripped the crowd, and I felt the urgency of their fear wrap around me like a cloak. Then I looked back. The man was watching me, a mixture of helplessness and warning in his gaze. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was lurking beyond the trees was now focused on me. I had only moments to decide what to do, and the shadows were closing in fast. What was it? I murmured under my breath. What had I unwittingly become a part of? That was when I heard it again, a rustle in the underbrush, more pronounced this time. My heart sank. Someone, or something, was coming for me. On instinct, I turned and ran deeper into the chaos, knowing that the answers I sought were now weaving into danger I couldn't escape. The street felt alive with chaos. People pushed past me, their faces twisted in fear, urgency driving them to flee. I stumbled, feeling the weight of their panic crash against me. Every instinct screamed for me to turn back, but I kept running. I had to escape. Escape the questions, the whispers, the presence that haunted this place. As I dashed around the corner, a stark alley opened up to my left. My eyes darted down it. There was an old wooden door marked with peeling paint. It looked like it hadn't been opened in years, but it seemed like a better option than facing whatever was emerging from the woods. I shot down the alley, my breath quickening. I reached the door and pushed against it. Surprisingly, it creaked open, revealing a dark interior. Without wasting a second, I slipped inside and shut it behind me, leaning against the door to catch my breath. The air was stale, filled with the scent of damp wood and something more musty. "Hello?" I called out softly, hoping for an answer. Silence greeted me, thick and oppressive. My heart pounded in my ears, and I could hear the distant noise of people still scattering outside. I strained to listen for any sign of what might be following me. I took a cautious step further into the darkness. A faint light flickered in the corner, illuminating a cluttered room filled with odd trinkets and pieces of furniture that looked like they belonged in a museum. A small table was stacked high with worn books, some open and pages dog-eared. That's when I noticed a shadow moving at the far end of the room. My heart dropped. "Is anyone there?" I forced the words out, my voice shaky. "Depends on who's asking," came a gravelly voice from the shadows. A figure emerged, revealing a man with a scruffy beard and piercing blue eyes. He looked like he had been hiding out in this room for quite some time. "You're not from around here, are you?" he said. I shook my head, too startled to respond. He stepped closer, his gaze sharp. "You saw it, didn't you?" I nodded, an icy feeling creeping up my spine. "What is it?" He blew out a breath, and even in the dim light I could see the worry etched on his face. "It's a guardian of sorts, and not just of the forest. It guards secrets, secrets of the people of this place, and now it's following you." "Why me?" I asked, panic creeping back in. "I didn't do anything wrong." He studied me intently. "Sometimes asking questions is all it takes. You've stirred the balance." My thoughts raced. I felt like I was caught in a web I didn't understand. What am I supposed to do? How do I get away from it? "Gaining the knowledge can be a curse," he said, glancing toward the door, his expression darkening. "But you'll need to find the answers. You must confront the hunter. You can't outrun it." Before I could respond, a loud crash came from outside, followed by a scream. The man's eyes widened and he grabbed my arm. "We have to move. If they've come for you, that thing isn't far behind." As I let him pull me toward the back of the room, I felt a surge of dread. I was still trying to process everything, his words, the sound of danger closing in, but I knew I couldn't just stand by. Whatever this creature was, it had claimed the lives of others before me, and I was determined not to be next. Then the door rattled violently, and a growl echoed through the space. I could feel the air grow heavier. "It's here," I whispered, my heart racing with realization. The man's grip tightened. "We need to go. Now." We raced through the dark room, my pulse drumming in my ears. I could still hear the growl outside, deep and resonant, a sound that could chill the blood. The man led me toward a narrow staircase at the back of the room, every step quick and purposeful. I stumbled a bit, trying to keep up. "Who are you?" I managed to ask between breaths. "Call me Ethan," he replied, glancing back over his shoulder. "And we've got to hurry." The staircase creaked ominously under our weight, each step echoing like a warning. The air grew cooler as we descended, a stark contrast to the chaos above. Dim light flickered from a nearby lantern, barely illuminating the stone walls. I could feel the weight of uncounted stories pressing down on us. "What's down here?" I asked, feeling both curious and afraid. "An old safe house," he said, his voice low. "People used to come here for refuge from the forest. It's outdated, but secure. For now. What's happening outside? I pressed, desperate for answers. They're confused, he replied, pausing as we reached the bottom. They're scared, and that thing out there, it feeds on fear. If it senses you're scared, it'll be drawn to you. I swallowed hard, the tightness in my throat growing. What do we do if it finds us? We wait, he said simply, his expression darkening as he scanned the small space. But I don't think it will take long. We need a plan. Ethan moved to the far corner where more books sat in dusty piles. He began rifling through them with urgency. I stepped closer, my eyes darting around for anything useful, a weapon, a way to escape, anything. Then I noticed an old map tacked to the wall. My heart quickened as I studied it. There was a marked area deep in the woods, right where I'd seen the creature emerge. "What's this?" I asked, pointing to it. Ethan glanced up, frustration etched on his face. "That's where it all begins, the heart of the forest. The creature is a guardian of sorts, but it has become twisted. It's guarding dark secrets." "What kind of secrets?" I pressed. "Things people would rather forget," he muttered. "And if you're in its sights, you have to confront it there. It won't let you go until you do." A sudden crash echoed from above, shaking dust from the ceiling. I gasped, instinctively stepping back into the shadows, heart racing. Ethan grabbed my arm again, pulling me toward another door at the end of the room. "We have to move before it breaks through," he urged. "Follow me and stay close." We slipped through the door, but the moment we stepped outside, I was hit with something sharp, a strange sense that we were no longer alone. I turned to Ethan. "Did you feel that?" Before he could respond, something darted past us deep within the trees. My heart leaped. There it was, the creature, dark and enormous with glowing eyes. I froze, terror taking hold. Ethan's grip on my arm tightened, and he pulled me again, not waiting for me to catch up. "Run!" he shouted, and we ran. We sprinted into the trees, branches whistling past us like whispers from the shadows. I could hear the creature following, its heavy footsteps crunching the underbrush. Panic surged through me. Why was this happening? "Keep going," Ethan yelled, glancing back to see if it was still there. His face was taut with determination. I pushed myself harder, every part of me screaming to stop, to look back, but I couldn't. We raced deeper into the woods, the darkness thickening around us. I felt the cool air wrap around my body, chilling my sweat-soaked clothes. We veered to the left, trying to lose it, my lungs burning with each gulp of air. Ethan suddenly stopped, pulling me behind a massive tree trunk. My heart nearly stopped with him as we crouched low, trying to slow our breathing. I could barely catch my breath, feeling both restless and terrified. "Do you have any weapons?" I whispered urgently, scanning the area frantically. Ethan shook his head, eyes darting around. "Nothing but these trees. If it finds us, we may have to think of something else." I swallowed hard. "What do you mean? You don't have a plan?" "We can't stay here," he said, voice tense, "but we need to distract it. If we can split its focus, we might get a chance to escape." Suddenly, a low growl echoed nearby, and the hairs on the back of my neck rose. I looked up to see glowing eyes cutting through the shadows. It was close. "What do we do?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Ethan's gaze shifted to a pile of fallen branches beside us. "We can create noise, throw something to confuse it, then we run." I nodded even though my heart hammered as I picked up a small rock. My hands trembled. I threw it towards the tree line opposite us. The stone landed with a thud, and for a split second, the creature's attention faltered. "Now!" Ethan shouted. We bolted away from the tree, but my legs felt like lead. I didn't dare look back, focusing instead on the shadows ahead. Just as we entered a clearing, I tripped over a hidden root, crashing into the dirt. Pain shot through my knee. I gasped, scrambling to get back to my feet, but the creature was already closing in, a massive silhouette against the dark. "Get up!" Ethan shouted. He was already moving further into the clearing. I forced myself to stand, adrenaline overriding the pain, and then I saw it. An old structure half covered in vines and moss, a cabin ancient and decaying, but it seemed to hold a promise of safety. "In there!" I yelled, pointing toward the building. Ethan nodded and sprinted toward it, and I followed, forcing my legs to move despite the sharp pang in my knee. We reached the door and stumbled inside, slamming it shut behind us. Breathless, I turned to Ethan, my eyes wide with fear. "Will it follow us in here?" "We have to hope it doesn't," he replied, glancing around the dark interior. "But we can't stay here long. There's something I need you to see." "What is it?" I asked, still trying to catch my breath. Ethan stepped to a corner where a dusty old chest sat, barely visible in the faint light. He crouched down, fingers brushing across the lid. "It might explain everything, even what the creature is." I held my breath, anxiety creeping back in. What was he about to uncover? Then, suddenly, the door shuddered behind us, a low growl echoing outside. I felt a cold wave of dread wash over me. Before Ethan could open the chest, the door slammed against the wall, and the creature barged in. The door hit the wall with a force that sent shivers down my spine. The creature stood silhouetted in the doorway, its massive frame filling the entrance with a suffocating darkness. I could barely make out its features, but the glint of sharp teeth in its snarl was unmistakable. "Ethan!" I shouted, but my voice was drowned out by the creature's growl. Panic surging through me, I turned to look for a way out, but there was none. The chest loomed behind us like an anchor in a storm. "Get behind the chest!" Ethan yelled. His voice broke through the fog of fear, and I obeyed, stumbling to the side. I pressed myself against the wall as he edged closer to the chest, searching desperately for something to defend ourselves with. The creature stepped further into the cabin, inch by agonizing inch. I could see now that its fur seemed matted, tangled with twigs and dirt. It moved as if it were part of the shadow itself, and a wave of terrible recognition washed over me. This wasn't just any predator. It felt ancient, primal, as if it belonged to stories told in whispers around campfires. "Ethan, we can't fight it," I yelled, the words clawing their way out. "We have to distract it again," he said, his voice low and steady. "If we can buy time, maybe we can escape through the back." Buy time? How? My heart raced. The thing was too close, and I could feel its intense stare locked on us. "Wait," he replied. His eyes flicked to the chest before he knelt again, and I noticed something carved into the surface. Symbols, almost like a language. "Ethan, what is that?" I pointed, realizing the markings seemed to shift with the creature's movements. He seemed to forget the danger for a moment, leaning in closer. "I think this might be a key to understanding it." But the creature lunged, a blur of fur and fangs aimed right at us. I screamed as Ethan's hand shot out, grabbing a rusty old shoehorn from the chest just as the creature barreled forward. "No!" He swung the improvised weapon wildly, catching it across the snout. The beast yelped, stumbling back. "Now!" Ethan shouted. He dashed toward the back of the cabin, and I followed, my feet moving almost on instinct. The creature recovered quickly, growling furiously as it tore across the room, crashing into furniture. Just as we reached the rear exit, I felt a breath close behind me. I darted through the door just as the creature slammed against the wall beside me, almost too late. "Move," Ethan urged. We stumbled out into the dark hinterland behind the cabin, breathing heavily, but then I stopped, my heart sinking. "Which way?" Ethan looked around, panic flashing in his eyes. "We can't go back into the woods. We need to find higher ground." I could hear the creature inside, thrashing against the walls, searching for us. It wouldn't be long before it came out. Just then, I noticed a narrow path, dimly lit by moonlight. "There," I pointed, and he nodded. We took off again, adrenaline pushing us forward. As we climbed higher, I felt my knees protest, but the urgency of the moment carried me. "What do we do when we find higher ground?" I asked between breaths. Ethan turned toward me, and for a moment the fear in his eyes was replaced by something else. "There's a clearing up ahead where we can get some distance. I can try to communicate with it." "What?" I gasped, utterly incredulous. "You can't be serious." But before he could respond, an eerie howl echoed in the distance, chilling me to the bone. It sounded oddly familiar, resonating in a way that felt like more than just a typical animal call. "I found out something about it when I touched those markings," Ethan said, his face tense. "But if we don't get away from here—" Then I stopped, frozen at the edge of the clearing. I squinted into the darkness ahead. "Ethan, there's someone there." Staring back at us from the other side of the opening was a figure, and in that moment a new wave of dread washed over me. The figure stood motionless, barely illuminated by the flickering moonlight, but I could make out the outline of a tall woman. She looked disheveled, her hair wild, eyes wide and darting as if she was just as startled to see us as we were to see her. My breath caught in my throat. "Ethan, who is that?" I whispered, glancing back at him. "I don't know," he replied, his voice barely a whisper. "Maybe she can help us." But something in the way she stood, almost rooted to the ground, told me we had stumbled into yet another layer of danger. "Are you okay?" Ethan called out, taking a cautious step forward. The woman flinched at the sound of his voice, her eyes narrowing at him in the dim light. "Go back. You shouldn't be here," she shrieked, her voice cracking like dried leaves underfoot. "Why? What's wrong?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. The creature was still inside the cabin, but now I felt like this woman posed a different kind of threat. Her gaze darted around, and she took a small step toward us. "It's waiting for you. It knows you're here. You brought it." "What do you mean?" "We didn't bring anything," Ethan shot back, squaring his shoulders. But she shook her head, agitated. "No, you don't understand. It was drawn to the markings. It's been searching for them." "What markings?" I asked, a sense of dread pooling in my gut. Her eyes flared wide. "The ones on the chest. You touched them, didn't you?" Before I could think, I nodded. "Yes, but—" Her body tensed like a coiled spring. "They're a call to it, a signal. You've awakened something." Fear flooded over me like icy water. I could hear the distant sound of trees bending in the wind, accompanied by a deep, guttural growl echoing through the clearing. "Get away from here!" she screamed, eyes frantic. "You need to run!" "Wait!" Ethan shouted, but she turned and bolted back into the shadows. I hesitated, torn between following her and staying with Ethan. "Do we go after her?" I stammered, but before he could respond, the creature's howl cut through the air, a warning or a promise. It was hard to tell. My chest squeezed with the weight of impending doom. "Not yet," Ethan said urgently. He scanned our surroundings, then turned back to me. "We need to keep moving. The more we stay here, the worse it gets. Maybe we can find a place to hide." I looked back at the dense tree line. "What about her? We can't just leave her." But Ethan shook his head. "She's right. We can't afford to wait. We'll come back for her if we can." With a final glance into the shadows, I turned and followed him deeper into the darkness. Every crackle of twigs underfoot felt amplified, every rustle in the leaves a reminder of how exposed we were. Then something caught my eye, a glimmer of light ahead. "Look," I pointed, the instinct to just run overtaking my panic. A small cabin similar to the one we'd just escaped sat nestled between the trees. As we approached, I felt a surge of hope. Maybe it would offer some form of safety, but something inside me whispered that it might only lead us deeper into danger. "What if it's empty?" I questioned, uncertainty creeping into my tone. Ethan frowned. "It doesn't matter. We need to find shelter. There's no time to waste." But then I remembered the woman's warning. "Ethan, what if it's a trap?" He paused, his hand hovering over the door handle. "If it's a trap, we'll face it together. I won't let it take you." Suddenly the ground trembled beneath our feet. a low growl rumbling closer. I pressed against the cabin, heart racing, praying it wasn't too late. "We need to decide now," Ethan urged. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to face whatever awaited us inside. But the question lingered as we crossed the threshold. Was it a shelter or a snare? And that was when I understood something darker was at play. The moment we stepped into the cabin, a heavy silence enveloped us. The air was stale, and I caught a whiff of something ancient, like dust and decay. I glanced around, taking in the peeling wallpaper and dilapidated furniture. Shadows danced menacingly in the corners, and for a split second, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this would offer us some respite. Ethan moved cautiously, scanning every nook and cranny. I followed closely, my heart pounding in my chest. That creature wasn't far behind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. "The door," Ethan whispered, his eyes fixed on it. "We need to barricade it." Before I could respond, he was already at the door, searching for something to block it. I quickly spotted a heavy table nearby and rushed to help. Our muscles strained as we shoved it against the door, hoping it would hold whatever was about to come crashing through. Then we paused, catching our breath. "What now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though the tremor betrayed me. "We wait," Ethan said, surveying the small space. "But I think we need to figure out what that woman was talking about. If those markings are calling it, we could be in real trouble." I nodded, trying to suppress the rising dread. What if it's already too late? What if it's already here? Just then, the wooden floor groaned ominously beneath us. A shudder ran through the cabin, as if the very walls were anxious about what lurked outside. The growling was closer now, vibrating through the air like a storm warning. "Let's check for those markings," Ethan said, urgency written across his face. I followed him to the back of the cabin, the shadowy recesses pulling at my anxiety. As we searched desperately, I remembered the woman's frantic voice, warning us of the danger we had awoken. It gnawed at me, the sensation that we were standing on a fault line, dancing on the brink of something explosive. Then I heard it. A muffled noise from the other side of the door. The creature was trying to get in. I turned to Ethan in panic. "It's coming! What do we do?" "Look!" he shouted, pointing to an old, dusty chest tucked against the wall in the far corner, just like the one we had escaped from earlier. Holding my breath, I dashed over and threw it open. Inside, I found a collection of objects, old amulets, rusty blades, and what looked like ritualistic items. Everything felt heavy with history and purpose. "Do you think these would work against it?" I asked, picking up an amulet that glimmered dully in the fading light. Ethan scrutinized the items, his brows furrowing. "Maybe, but we need to understand how. That creature isn't just some wild animal. It's linked to the very essence of this place." Another crash echoed from the door, shaking the cabin. The table began to shift under pressure. We had mere seconds before it broke through. "It's pulling energy," Ethan said suddenly. "Whatever that creature is, it feeds off fear. If we can confront it with courage instead, maybe we can turn the tide." "What if it's stronger than that?" I asked, terror threatening to engulf me. "What if we fail?" Ethan locked eyes with me, imploring. "We can't think like that. We face it together." Before I could respond, the door splintered, a crack forming as claws scraped against the wood. I lunged for the amulet, slipping it around my neck and feeling an unexpected surge of warmth, as if the weight of the moment was lending strength to my resolve. With mutual determination, we stood side by side, facing the door as it finally gave way. The darkness flooded in, and with it, the creature, massive and fierce, its glowing eyes locked on us with undeniable intent. In that instant, inundated with fear, I felt something shift within me. "We won't fear you," I shouted, my voice shaky but fierce. "We came here seeking answers." The creature paused, its growl momentarily quieting, as if registering my words. Ethan stepped forward beside me. "We stand for those you've taken," he added, his voice gaining strength. The growl subsided, replaced by an eerie silence. It was almost as if the creature was considering us, its anger wavering amidst the weight of our conviction. I dared to breathe, my heart still racing. "What are you protecting?" I asked, invoking the remnants of courage surging within. The creature's ears perked up, tension radiating through the air, cloaked in mystery. It seemed to be listening. "I don't know if anyone can understand you," I said softly. "But what happened to the others? Why have they disappeared? What do you want?" Silence hung heavy, broken only by the distant sounds of rustling leaves, as if the world around us awaited an answer too. The creature shifted, then, almost imperceptibly, stepped back. A gesture, a warning. I couldn't tell, but a flicker of hope ignited in my chest. Maybe we'd struck a chord, a bargain of sorts. My mind raced. "Maybe we can help each other," I said. "Show us what's hidden in the shadows, and we'll help protect this place, help you maintain balance." In a heart-stopping instant, the creature drew closer, its eyes burning into mine. I could feel my heart hammering, but there was a glint of understanding, a shared purpose. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, it turned and bounded into the dark, disappearing into the trees. I stood, breathless, as the eerie calm washed over us. The pressure of fear began to dissipate, the weight of the moment still hanging in the air. I glanced sideways at Ethan, who was equally stunned. "I don't know if it's gone for good," he murmured, still searching for the creature in the shadows. "But I think we've just begun to understand what lies here." The fear was still there, an echo in my mind, lingering like a half-remembered cautionary tale. But the resolve had taken root too. Questions remained unanswered, and the darkness loomed large. "Do you think we can find those who went missing?" I whispered, though I knew there was no clear answer. For now, we were alive, threaded into a web of secrets that danced just outside our grasp. As we cautiously stepped into the night, uncertainty loomed ahead, reminding me that some mysteries would never fully unravel. I'd never be able to shake the feeling that this place was intertwined with something ancient, something far beyond my understanding. And deep down, I knew I'd never truly escape its grasp. I moved to a different city after that. Sometimes I wonder if my neighbor is still there, if those things still happen. But mostly I try not to think about it.